Welcome back to the Viking Update Show on Talk North Podcasting Network. I am John Krasinski. Typically, I am the talent in this production. I am the one that you all come to hear the answers for. Jim Suhan is always the straight man and the setup guy. He is abdicated his responsibilities. He is left the nest for a little bit and is away from town. So we are joined now by the intrepid Alec Lewis, down south still right now, right? I don't want to blow up your whole spot, but you are down in the deep south, kind of soaking in your last days of freedom before training camp.
Yeah, I love the humidity so much that I just can't really escape it. But you're still the talent, by the way. Let's make that very clear. That's still your role here. And I always appreciate that Jim gets to go to an exotic location, the Caribbean or the Augusta National Golf Course, and I get to fill in. So happy to be here. Should be fun. Got football soon.
Football soon. We are brought to you by the Aquarius Home Services Studios. We are True Vision Institute in Bloomington, TSR Time, and Twill by Scott Dayton. Our producer is Davide Rosso. So we're going to talk a lot of Vikings on this show just to kind of set the stage a little bit for training camp, which is just right around the corner, and just kind of touch base with Alec, who has been totally plugged in on the Viking beat all summer long and catching up with things. And Alec, I guess the first thing that I wanted to start with is what is your overall feeling around this team kind of going into training camp? Because from afar, I got a little bit of the heebie-jeebies, right? I mean, clearly Kyrie Jackson's death, awful, tragic, terrible. But then you have Jordan Addison's arrest. You have a few things that are just that have happened that just seem to give me a bit of uneasiness about just where the team is at as they approach training camp here. What's your read on just the state of things from a vibe standpoint and just from an overall temperament of the team, given all of kind of the things that they've had to deal with this offseason?
Yeah, I think that's the right place to start. I was on the phone earlier today with a college coach, and we were talking about, he's worked with a couple of the Vikings guys and is pretty close to them. And he was asking me, what is the feeling? What does it feel like? And I kind of said to him, I was like, it just felt, the last few weeks have just not felt, I think, the way that the Vikings internally would have wanted them to coming into training camp. And I go back, and I even had a story on The Athletic earlier this week that was just a survey of asking fans what they thought about the offseason. And people, I think, have been really, they viewed the offseason and the moves and all of that pretty positively. If you go back to moving on from Kirk Cousins, if you go back to how they handled the draft and adding J.J. McCarthy and Dallas Turner and some of the free agent moves. And I think just from a transition standpoint, people felt good about the direction of where things were going. And then you get to, what you referenced, which is a few weeks ago with the Kyrie Jackson death and the death of Isaiah Hazel and Anthony Lighton, and how that made people feel, rightfully, how brutal of a situation that was. And to have that followed up on a weekend night that just should not have been newsworthy with the arrest of Jordan Addison in Los Angeles, it just makes you feel like the optimism that you would have had coming into a training camp with an entirely kind of new breath, like a new chapter, feels like it's kind of just clouded, like a little bit of a black cloud over things. So yeah, I your sentiment to me is exactly how I feel in terms of I feel like Monday, when Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell speak to media members as they're scheduled to on Monday, it's kind of like all right, can you steer this thing on the right path as they get ready for what is going to be a really interesting season?
Jordan Addison, we've talked a lot about Kyrie Jackson, and I honestly just don't want to even go into the whole how do they replace him in football and all that yet. I think it's too soon, and that'll all play out naturally over the next several weeks. But for Jordan Addison, I think there is a football conversation we can have right now, because he had the reckless driving thing last year, and honestly, for me, I looked at that as I'm going to give him a little grace here. I was that young at one time too. If I just got a bunch of money in my bank account and you probably couldn't tell me nothing, and I'd want to test out how fast I could go in this car. Was it stupid? Yes. Was it dangerous? Yeah, absolutely. Was the dog excuse ridiculous? Yeah. But he's also a very young kid. Made a mistake. I'm going to let that slide a little bit. But then now you put this arrest on top of it. And I feel like we've gotten to a point now where you do ask real questions about him as, a person, as someone that this team can rely on going forward. What do you think the organization's viewpoint is right now of him and, what they have in both the player and the person, as they enter this training camp with a lot still to be determined about discipline and all of that with him?
Yeah, well, I go back to last year in the situation where he did drive 140 miles an hour. And I think that was an initial okay, you got to rebuild trust with us pouring in an incredible amount of resources to make you a first round pick. And I believe they felt like he could respond from that. I remember the day I was in Jacksonville with when that happened. It was in the afternoon when that news surfaced, and he put out a statement pretty quickly through the team of I sincerely apologize. This isn't going to happen again. And so obviously to have the year that he had from an on the field standpoint and just from he was quiet off the field. I think that did a lot in terms of rebuilding the trust internally of this is why we poured in the resources. And then he shows up this spring. And if you talk to anybody internally in terms of the most impressive players and just people this spring in the absence of Justin Jefferson, they would have brought up Jordan Addison's name. He looked really good on the field. He gelled very well in his media sessions. He was more open than he'd ever been and more, I think, personable than he'd ever been. And then so to have the situation happen, to me, it is from an internal perspective. It's again, you lose trust. You lose the trust that you'd spend a year kind of building up and rebuilding. And I also think about, there was a press conference. It might have been during last year's training camp. It might have been towards the end of last year where, just frankly, Kevin O'Connell made kind of an offhand joke about him driving fast. And it's one of those things where, it's at the time, ha ha, but it is a serious thing, whether it's driving 140 miles an hour, whether it's falling asleep, per the initial police report, falling asleep in a Rolls Royce in the highway. These are not situations to make jokes. This is a very serious thing. And for a team that is in a transition phase with young players that need to be kind of assuming some kind of leadership responsibility, to me, it's kind of a check in the face of all right, how from Kevin O'Connell, who's pushed a lot of the right buttons through 2 years, how much is he going to be willing to really come down pretty hard in terms of from a discipline standpoint and accountability standpoint. And I would expect him on Monday when he does speak to the media, Kevin O'Connell, to take a pretty hardline stance with a lot of this. And I say all that knowing that we don't have all the facts of the police report at this point. So I don't want to get overly crazy ahead of myself, but it is a concern. I mentioned last year he put out a statement immediately. To this point, and we're speaking on Thursday afternoon, there has not been any statement. I know his agent, Tim Younger, very well. Tim has not been in response to me and some of the messages I've sent. So it's an interesting one, and it's one that again, to start this training camp after the spring and the year that Jordan Addison had, and really he is the one real bright spot of Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's drafts. And that's the other aspect of it. If you talk about positives, he's the one place you would have gone. And I think, again, you lose trust in that regard as well.
Well, and then also too, from a football standpoint, of all the position groups to have a question, that's not the one. I think that obviously it's JJ number one. And then I think that with KJ going to New England, there's a serious lack of depth there. And you figured, yes, Jordan Addison's going to be the number two. He was very productive on the field last season, showed a lot of great signs, and comes into the offseason program looking very impressive. And so, okay, he's going to make the step and be a really good number two next to Jefferson. Now, if he's going to be suspended for any amount of time, you're going to miss him early on. for games if that in fact does happen. But then also, you were already looking for a number 3, and then if you can't trust your number 2, that's a tough spot to be in.
Yeah, I mean, you also probably are not going to have TJ Hawkinson for
Right.
an extended period to start the year. So this offense, which is the idea, this passing game, which is the identity, it's been the identity of Kevin O'Connell's time here. And from an offensive standpoint, that's supposed to be the identity. It puts you in a really tough position. Like I mean, I'd say I've kind of bang the drum on the lack of receiver depth going back a couple months now. Like KJ Osborne is a guy, I know a couple of people internally wanted them to bring him back because they saw him as a valuable piece who could run block in a way that Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison just can't, or probably shouldn't be in those types of positions. So now, to your exact point, without having potentially TJ Hawkinson, you're in it's a depleted facet of your team potentially that is supposed to be your identity. And in a season that was already going to be very difficult from a schedule perspective, from a cornerback depth perspective, there are questions on the interior, the offensive line, defensive line. You really can't afford for this to be a question mark if you want to compete in a third season for your GM and head coach where they haven't received extensions. Like, I know that's probably not it's not rosy, and I know we're in Vikings land, so being negative is probably par for the course, but I mean, it's just reality. It's not me really providing much conjecture on it.
It feels like the way that this is all set up, if the Vikings are going to, let's say, exceed expectations this year, which I think are, largely mid going into this season, right? Like, I mean, it's just, okay, they're in a period of transition, new quarterback, all this stuff. But if they are going to take that jump up, it's going to be because they are dynamic offensively. Because whether it's Darnold or JJ McCarthy, they get in there and they just have control of things. And then it's Jefferson, it's Addison, it is Hawkinson getting back eventually and being a big part of that. It's Aaron Jones, fountain of youth. Like, that's the way to do it, right? Is like, and I know that Flores will have the defense competitive, maybe even better than last year, but I got to think, right? Like, you need your home run hitters are on offense. And that's that's the pathway to, hey, they've actually are really in the mix of a wild card berth or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, when I used to cover baseball, we used to always say, like, yeah, if all of these aspects go right, the team can succeed. And with this Vikings passing game, I didn't really feel like there were a ton of ifs. Like, could the interior hold up? Maybe that was an if. Wide receiver 3, maybe an if. Like, Aaron Jones' health, I guess that's an if. But now, I mean, you're talking, like, can Robert Tonyan be an effective player? I mean, that's a major if. Yeah. Aaron Jones' health, I guess now there's even more emphasis that has to be placed on it. So, yeah, it is. I mean, I'm in agreement with you. I think Brian Flores will have the defense ready. I do believe that from a scheme standpoint, Sam Darnold will be solid enough, I believe. Justin Jefferson, I don't worry about, obviously. That's not going out on a limb. I think Christian Darrisaw is going to be good, and Brian O'Neill, another year removed from the partially torn Achilles, will probably be better on the right side. But again, just the more these questions exist, the more the ifs exist. I mean, the harder it is to believe that you're not going to be in a place where you're struggling, where Sundays are tough, where the fans react negatively, where the push for the young quarterback starts to heighten, that noise amplifies, and then it's almost like you just get a little bit sped up. I mean, I'll talk basketball cliches with you. It's like on the court, if you're more sped up, you're more willing to turn the ball over, make decisions that you probably wouldn't make in a more calm environment. And I think you're kind of, in this regard, in this circumstance, they're playing with fire more in that regard than I think I would have expected them to be at this point in the year. Again, I'm not trying to be overly crazy, but it's just the reality.
Yeah. We're talking with Alec Lewis, the Athletics Vikings beat writer here on the Viking Update Show. We're going to step away for just a minute to hear from our sponsors. And then when we come back, we'll get into some stuff that hopefully maybe we'll finish on a good note. Maybe we won't have you, kind of hanging off the side of a building somewhere. And so let's break for a second and we'll be right back.
Scott for Aquarius Home Services. Making your life better is a huge priority for us at Aquarius. It may start with providing worry-free water or heating and cooling systems you can trust, but there's another very important reason. Aquarius is family-owned and operated. We work hard to earn the right to be recommended. That means upfront, no-surprise pricing, providing a 5-star experience, and treating your home and time with respect. And knowing we're just a click away at AquariusHomeservices.com.
I want to let you know that went into Twill recently and had the best shopping experience of my life. I got everything I wanted. It all fits me perfectly. It took me about 10 minutes. If I hadn't been in a hurry, I would have lingered and talked more and enjoyed the experience. But I was in a hurry this one day. In and out 10 minutes. What you should know about Twill in the Edina Galleria, Twill by Scott Dayton, is they just started their summer clearance sale. 40% off seasonal items. This place doesn't have many sales. It's not a discount shop. They sell stuff that they expect to last you the rest of your life. So if the sales are relatively rare, you should take advantage of them. I highly recommend Peter Millar, Johnny O, Brax. Those are the things I wear the most around town. And it's fantastic stuff. It's not going to wear out on you. It's not going to be something you need to replace in a year or two. It's stuff that fits perfectly. So check it out. Go to twillmn.com. Sign up for their email list. They will not spam you. They'll just tell you about events like this. And 40% off stuff at Twill. You're basically getting incredibly high-end stuff at discount prices. I highly recommend it. Twill in the Edina Galleria, twillmn.com. Also want you to hear what John Krasinski's experience with True Vision Institute is like.
Yeah, True Vision Institute in Bloomington. I was there earlier this week to get a consultation for LASIK surgery. Found out I'm a great candidate for it, and super easy to set up an appointment. Go in there. They run you through a bunch of tests. Their people are very nice, and they will give you a straight up and honest answer for your options for your vision correction. And I'm looking forward to having LASIK at True Vision once the playoffs are over. So go to truevision.com to set up your appointment, and you won't be disappointed at all. Great people at True Vision.
We also want to thank our friend Steve Terry and TSR Injury Law, sponsors of this show, sponsors the John Krasinski Show on the Timberwolves on this network. Great guy, great company. They have gotten a lot of money for deserving clients. They will not charge you unless they win your case, and they win a lot of cases. That's why you see billboards all over the city with Steve Terry hanging out with Naz Reid. It's a great alliance. We really enjoy that. So if you're ever injured, just remember 612-TSR-TIME, 612-TSR-TIME.
All right, we're back here with the Viking Update Show. I'm John Krasinski, here with my athletic teammate, Alec Lewis. And we've hyperventilated a lot this first half of the pod, Alec, and rightfully so. I don't think that we are wrongfully overreacting with any of this stuff. But with training camp so close, what do you feel good about right now? As the Vikings get back to on the field, as fans are nervous about what they've seen, what can they take a step back and say, all right, yeah, I like this. This is going to be something both interesting and potentially very productive going into this season?
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's wrong, but I just start with Brian Flores in the second year of a system with a bunch of players who for years have just had to learn a new system year after year after year, and they weren't really building and having continuity. So I think about the safety group, the Cam Bynum, Josh Metellus, Harrison Smith group. Are there questions? Harrison Smith is a year older. Cam Bynum, is he the most athletic player in the world? No, but I think the continuity with that group is really, really important. And then I think, just to be more youthful and versatile on that side in terms of Jonathan Grenard, I think his upside is very interesting. Blake Cashman's range at linebacker, I think that's interesting. Ivan Pace, another year. I think it's easy to think positively there. And then Dallas Turner, assuming he signs his contract before training camp, which I expect him to. You just Andrew Van Ginkel when he gets back healthy. A lot of those pieces, the interchangeability of them, and then Brian Flores' proven track record being able to maximize the talent. That to me is it's going to be interesting to see. I don't think it's going to be like last year when he came in and every practice them dominating seemed like a fun observation story, scene setting piece. I don't foresee writing a ton about that, but I think overall, just the consistency and building the scheme day to day will play itself out in a way that to me is going to be interesting to watch. And I do feel good about just him being able to use the talent that he has and putting them in the best position to be successful, which is the most coaching cliche ever, but I actually think he does it.
It does. It did feel like last year, everything that he was doing was subterfuge, was rabbit out of a hat, was like, how can I trick the offense into this? How can I, make them think that we're better here than we actually are? Like, all of that was smoke and mirrors, and it ended up, I think, going better than most people could have reasonably expected. I don't think they have Lawrence Taylor and Mike Singletary and everyone like that to go yet, but like, it does feel like the pieces that he has available to him are more in line of, I don't have to trick people. I'm just going to try and do what I want to do. And like, maybe there's even more of an identity. Like, I think of the Wolves defense a couple of years ago when it was like, all we're doing is flying around and hoping we create some turnovers, and we're going to get beat a lot, but we're also going to make some big plays, and we're just going to play with our hair on fire and get burned and win some that way. But this last year it was no. Like, this is Rudy, this is Jaden. Like, we know what we're doing, what we're capable of, and we're going to be consistent in executing that. It feels like they're getting closer to be able to like have the bullets in the chamber that Brian Flores actually wants to shoot, rather than, just kind of like conjuring things out of thin air.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Like, if you listen to his interviews in the past, or some of the, just you listen to the best defensive coaches ever talk, they will talk about, like, if you can play man coverage and play one-on-one and your guys are better than their guys, like, that is your preferred way to go about it. They did not play really man coverage at all last year. They didn't play man coverage nearly the amount that Brian Flores played in Miami. And do they have the cornerbacks to really play that level of man coverage? Probably not. But I agree with you in that, like, last year I felt like they were on polar ends of the spectrum. It was either max coverage, 8 guys dropping coverage, or max pressure, 8 guys at the quarterback, we're going to get beat deep. And I kind of see, if you think about it as just like a continuum spectrum, they were on the polar ends, and I kind of see them inching closer to the middle. You're going to get 5-man pressures. You're going to get 4-man pressures, some different coverage mix in there. And I just think towards the end of the year, some of the better offensive coaches and Zach Taylor and the Bengals, they started to figure out, like, they're going to run cover 2, dropping guys all over the place. We're going to beat them over the middle of the field. And I think they're going to have more change-ups this year that give them just a better chance of being successful. And I think it gives you a better chance. Like, another coaching cliche is like complementary football. They talk about it all the time, but I do believe, like, if you can just lean on that side a little more from an offensive standpoint, and deep, there's just more rhythm in terms of what you want to do on all sides of the ball, that I think it takes some of the pressure off the offense and special teams in some way that makes it, it just gives you a better chance and a more fighting chance on a consistent basis. So I see that happening. I mean, I still have questions. The cornerback depth is one of them. Interior defensive line, they did not add a Christian Wilkins, even though I think they really wanted to, but the price just got to a place where they didn't feel comfortable doing that. So there are questions for me, but I just think holistically, another year in this system and the personnel that they have gives me the optimism that Brian Flores and this staff will be able to just put together a more deceptive scheme on a week-to-week basis that's a little more in line with exactly what you said of what he would really want to do in his heart of hearts if he was being honest and you had him kind of in a true serum format. What
has stood out to you about the Netflix stock receiver so far? Anything surprise you or anything like that? Or what did you like? What have you enjoyed about that?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that I think the masses, like my aunt was talking about it the other day. She's like, Justin Jefferson seems like a family guy. Like that.
Yeah, family guy. Family guy. Yeah, as we've learned.
There you go.
Yeah.
But hey, there you go.
Yeah.
I think for me, you get to the masses got to see a lot of like what Justin Jefferson is, what he's like on a daily basis, how much the injuries like really did not affect his willingness to want to return and come back and play, how much he is driven to be the best. Like I think that stuff stood out. But I mean, I got to be honest, like I didn't. And this is just me personally. I didn't come away with it feeling like with Kirk, I felt like it was a really like behind the scenes look in a way that really made you think differently. With Justin, I don't know if it was as much that, and I was more kind of just interested by these off moments, whether it was Kevin O'Connell after the week 2 loss to Philadelphia, how really aggressive he was in the locker room to the team. Like Kevin, again, I kind of started at the top. He's been a guy who's very player centric, kind of like this nice guy. But I think in that situation, you saw like how frustrated he was with the standard not being met. And I think in a situation like they are in right now, from some of the team dynamics, like you need that bite, like you like being held accountable. It still really matters, and striking that balance in the right way, I think, was something you saw in that week 2 little moment that they showed, and something they're going to need to see. So for me, that's the stuff that I was kind of looking for. The Mekhi Blackmon jawing with Devontae Adams, and showing the type of competitiveness that I think guys like him are going to need. So it's an interesting behind the scenes look. It's pretty good. I think Anthony Edwards, as you can imagine, probably being around him, will probably say some stuff that will make you smile, laugh, feel more like I can't take my eyes off this than maybe I felt watching the series, if that makes sense.
Yeah, the O'Connell point is interesting because we both know that the participants in these series have a lot of control over what gets used and what doesn't. And I would imagine that Kevin knows his reputation as, hey, the player friendly, really relates to guys. A lot of what we see the Vikings put out on their socials with the interactions is kind of playful, cracking jokes, doing kind of stuff like that. We hear the player talk about all the time how much they like him and all of that. I imagine that he looked at that and said, you know what? Let's show people that I can actually get on someone's ass, because there's so much perception in this. Like maybe he'll be here coaching for 15 more years, or maybe it won't work out. Eventually he'll get fired. He's going to want a job somewhere else. And you have to sort of manage your image well. And so at some point you might say, oh, why did he let that part in? But I think it's like revealing of, hey, maybe you didn't expect this from me, and let me tell you that I'm not just a nice guy. Like I'm gonna hold these people to the fire a little bit every once in a while.
Yeah, and when the tweets after like ESPN's Kevin Sievert, I think, tweeted about that moment, and I wrote about it in that story I wrote kind of like after watching it that day, the media stats probably like, yeah, see, this is why we kept it there. They're doing exactly.
Told you,
yeah, exactly. But no, I mean, I do think that's definitely been an external criticism, especially through the turnovers early last year. I mean, I remember, thinking about it myself, but also listening to others talk about like, is he being hard enough on Alexander Mattison? Should they bench him? Like, is he capable of being that type of disciplinarian that you have to be? And so it makes sense. And I do think Kevin is he's not on social media a ton, but I do think he's very mindful.
He knows.
As a guy who was a media member himself after he finished playing, he was in the private coaching sector and he did radio, called San Diego State football games. Like this guy, he's very aware. He understands. And I mean, again, I think now, given some of what has happened the last few weeks, like, it is important that stuff is not just a flash in the pan shown on a Netflix. Like the reality is that a realistic quality that he can display on a weekly basis and knows when to deploy that type of stuff in the right way? Like that, those are the questions that I think over this next year or so, people are going to be really interested in kind of assessing. I mean, it's not even just like with some of the disciplinary stuff. It's also like with JJ McCarthy. How do you navigate if he's performing well? How do you navigate that? If he's not performing well, are you going to be just buddy all the time? Or can we hold him accountable? And what does that look like? Like those aspects. I think the greatest coaches have an ability to toggle between those in the right times and the right manners, depending on the player's personality. And so that stuff, I really do think as they are entering their third seasons as GM and head coach without extensions, like all of these aspects are on the line in terms of just kind of assessing what their futures might hold here.
Alec Lewis from The Athletic, great stuff. Your summer is over. It's time to get back to work. I know you've been kicking it up. You've been just being lazy and
right,
soaking it all
exactly.
in. So have your last bit of grits down there. Have your last, fried chicken. Do the fare of the South, and get back up here for some walleye on a stick and, and get ready to go, man.
It's funny because you asked after the initial segment where now I'm thinking back and I'm like, man, I didn't. That's not really me. I'm usually the positive.
The merchant of death here. Alex Lewis.
No, I should have just said like the kicker gives me the most excitement. I mean, that would have really spun.
My God.
Yeah, I can't imagine. No, I have been quietly. Yeah, you think I've been on the golf course? You think I've just been relaxing? I've got Google Docs full of stuff. I mean, I'm ready to roll. I'm ready to rip some stuff, some words. So I'm excited. I will be out there and probably make an analysis. Then you'll come out one day a week and somehow see it more clearly than I ever have. So that's what'll happen.
It's really not that hard. I keep telling you, it's just not that hard. But I can't wait to see you down there. Travel safe when you get back, and I appreciate it. And once again, thanks for everyone for listening to the Viking Update Show, brought to you from the Aquarius Home Services Studios, True Vision Institute, TSR Time, and Twill by Scott Dayton. Produced by Davide Rosso. Thanks a lot, guys, and we will talk to you next week.